Then it talks about the Emor, which is the harvesting of the HaOmer, which is then brought as an offering. And then that initiates the 49-day counting period between Passover. And this is following along in verse 11, in the countdown to the giving of the Torah on the 50th day. And it describes that offering. Then it says in verse 16, and you shall count for you then from the day after the first day of Passover, from the time that you brought the Omer offering, you're going to count 7 complete weeks. And that is the process of counting Sefiras HaOmer. Sefiras HaOmer is a marking of every single day and corresponding it to the 7 emotional character traits that each person has, general emotional character traits, and how they are composed of each of the other 7 emotional character traits. So we'll take a moment to describe those because it's something that's relevant to every person. Every person in their soul has the aspects of the 7 emotional character traits. First of all, we have the 3 intellectual traits. We have Chokhmah, we have Bina, and we have Das, which is wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And then from that knowledge, from that Das, from that connection flows emotions. So all our emotions come from a thought. And based on what thoughts we're taking seriously, then we have emotional experiences. A thought is is unrelated, in itself. When you have a thought, it doesn't actually have any effect in the world. But when that comes down into an emotion, what you're actually creating is electronic motion. Emotion is like for email, electronic mail. So emotion is electronic motion. You don't actually see any change on the outside of the person necessarily in a very strong emotion. You will see representations. Your body will change on the outside, but you could have an emotion of love or fear. Well, you can have an emotion that no one else could tell from outside of you. And but what's happening inside is actually electronic motion happening. There is a shift in your heart. There's a shift in your emotions, and you know about it because you can measure it. You can feel it, and it's real. Now, the emotion is a real experience that you're having, but it's only because you had a thought that you allowed to linger around. It could be a positive thought or a negative thought, a secure thought or insecure thought. But that's going to then trigger one of these emotions. Now, the emotions are chesed, loving kindness. Then there is gvura, which is discipline and severity. Then there's Sefiras, which is beauty, which is a beautiful combination of the two. It's also mercy. Mercy is the combination of loving kindness and discipline, of strictness. And then you have netzach, which is endurance, hod, which is splendor and acknowledgement and the gratitude. And then you have yesod, which is foundation and relationship. And then that leads into the 7th, which is the kind of the recipient of all those other 6, which is called malchus, which is nobility, which is the representation of the nobility of man. And that also comes out is expressed in speech. So when you're going to speak, so first you have a thought, then you figure out your thinking, and then that creates an emotion, and then that emotion then comes down into a lower level of now you're going to express yourself to another human being, and you could say to the other human being, I love you, or I don't like you, or whatever it is. I don't like this. I don't want this. You have all kinds of possibilities what you could say, but then you're going to say it using the faculty of speech, which is a garment for the lowest of these emotional attributes, which is nobility. Now, what we see is that each one of these 7 emotional traits that we just described contains within it all 7 emotional attributes. So you have loving kindness, which the emphasis within the loving kindness is loving kindness. Then you have severity within loving kindness. You have mercy and beauty within loving kindness. You have endurance within loving kindness, acknowledgement within loving kindness, and you have foundation within loving kindness, and then you have nobility within loving kindness. And then you repeat this for each one of the 7 emotional attributes. What is 7 times 7?
49.
49. That's exactly right. So 7 times 7, 49 is going to bring you to a completion of each one of these aspects within each other. And so each night of the Sefiras HaOmer, we of counting the sphere, we actually spend the time to focus on that particular attribute for that particular day. So what we're doing is we are taking the aspects of our animal soul and we are refining those aspects of the animal soul, because the godly part of us doesn't need to have any refinement. That's something that's there automatically. We don't need to do refining of the parts of us that are in constant contact with God Almighty. But to whatever degree that we are cognizant of that, and it's playing a role in our life. But the animal soul for sure needs work, because the animal soul is something that is just all it's focused on is on its meeting its animal needs. So it's kind of a little bit, it's barbaric. It's a little bit primitive, the animal soul, right? It's like the cow and the goats and stuff like that. Doesn't necessarily mean bad, but it just it's going to trample on everything in its way to get what it wants, right? So you see, if you're feeding goats, the male goat, only 2 goats in an entire pen, and the male goat was going to headbutt the female goat to push her away from getting the food. There's plenty of food for both of them, but his need to get his food is so unrefined, so grub. Say the word Yiddish grub, like in a very physicalized way. He can't even make space for his own mate. So we need to work on that. So this is the process. When we get taken out of Egypt on Passover, we're kind of like an unrefined mess, where we have liberty. We have liberty from slavery, but merely having liberty is not sufficient. A person has to refine themselves to become a mensch, has to refine themselves to become an upright human being, a noble human being. To become an upright, noble human being, has to focus on the aspects of his soul that need refinement. So we all go through this process of 49 days, which is 7 times 7 weeks, which is saying over here in the verse in the Torah that which you just said, right? In chapter 23, verse 16, have these 7 complete weeks. The words for Sefira, for counting, is from the same word as sapphire. It's like a translucent, sapphire is a translucent stone that the light comes through it and it shines, makes that stone shine, makes it brighter. We're chapter 23, verse 16. So, or verse 15. So that's what's happening. Meaning to say these emotional attributes we're talking about, they are not separate locations. They're not separate buttons. Some people try to put the diagrams of the Sefiras and of these aspects, and it confuses a person, because you start to think that there's some place you could point to and say that's like the dominion of Chesed, loving kindness. So that's the area of that, and that's not the way to understand it. These are different shinings of our personalities, of our emotional attributes, and they are all integrated in who we are. And there's some are more radiant and less radiant at different parts of our time and parts of our life. Our job is to bring them all to be refined and to be in the perfect combination, which the perfect combination is fascinating to understand over here, that the Torah is putting a tremendous emphasis on the individual person as what we are. The greatest aspiration is the individual person, because each one of us is a unique combination of these 49 attributes. It's not about, when we say refine your attributes or refine your traits, refine your emotional attributes, it's not about saying, hey, you got to be like me, or I've got to be like you, or we're going to choose one person who's perfect and we're all going to emulate him. Because that person, even if he is perfect in his 49 emotional attributes, he's reached the level of actual perfection in that, which is an awesome thing. And it's fantastic. but that's his particular combination and his particular shining of those 49 attributes of him in a way that is a perfection, that perfect reflection of his creator, and a perfect in his service of his creator and his emotional attributes. But I have a different combination of the 49 attributes, and you have a different combination of the 49 attributes. That's your job, is to bring those to the highest refined state so that they are now brought to the forefront. It's not trying to become somebody else. So we see that in the state of liberty, coming out of the land of Egypt and being taken by God Almighty out, the land of Egypt, the first thing the person has to do is to become an upright human being. And the upright human being has to become his own unique individual self. Like we said before, that the concept of Shabbos is to recognize, and the concept of these holidays is to recognize the Jewish holidays, that the Torah holidays, because they apply to all humanity, the understanding and the recognition of them is to come to teach us that we are not just random accidents. We are, in the contrary, we are intentional, divinely created beings with God's Almighty's loving imprint and his direct choice and creation of us at every moment. So now that you're free from Egypt, so we went through the process of coming out of Egypt, now you have liberty. But now it's your responsibility to now develop yourself into who you're really meant to be, which is to perfect these 49 emotional attributes, to bring them into a perfect combination that they're all shining. And being who we're supposed to be is not that was defined by some outside source. You know, people grow up in the different cultures and different families. Oh, you're supposed to be a doctor, you're supposed to be a lawyer, you're supposed to have a certain license, you're supposed to have a certain degree, you're supposed to make a certain amount of money, you're supposed to make a certain neighborhood, you're supposed to be afford a certain car. That is not God Almighty's intention for liberty. God Almighty's intention for liberty is that you are going to bring to the forefront your unique combinations of your intellectual and emotional characters to be this incredible human being that you are created to be and that you are already. And it just needs to be, and each one of us needs to work on refining it and bringing it to the forefront. So there's no cookie cutter here whatsoever. There's absolute uniqueness, and the opportunity for liberty to be free from the slavery of our thinking is to be able to bring each one of these to the forefront. For whose benefit? Well, on one hand, you're going to say it's for your benefit, but that's not really the real goal. The real goal is for how you're needed for somebody else, how you can bring your emotional attributes into the forefront for somebody else, to be of service to other human beings. Because if you go and to read all the self-help books, generally speaking, the whole self-improvement books are all about yourself. And you're going to figure out your vision. You're going to figure out what you want to do, and you're going to get your bucket list, and you're going to do all these things. You're going to keep working on yourself until you are this person that you've decided that you want to be. But the reality, the Torah has a completely different approach. The Torah says, no, it's not about becoming the person that you want to be for your sake. It's about becoming the person that God Almighty has given you the potential to be, with these 49 incredible different contributing jewels of sapphire that can come to shine together in the perfect combination. You're meant to bring that, and I'm meant to bring that to the forefront in a way that it's going to shine for other people. That's the whole purpose. Our purpose is to be of service to other people. So we need to take stock of that and say, here I am. I have my liberty. I've got my liberty from Passover, but now it's not about me. Now it's about working on myself, that I could be of better service and better shining for other people. Now, if we continue over here in the verses, we see that at the end of the 50 days, there's now the holiday of Shavuos, and that is when special sacrifices are brought. That's the timing of the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, and that's at the beginning of the month of Shavuos. That is on the 50th day after the first day of Passover. Then that's verse 21, talks about that's a holy day. And we need to make point of making sure that every human being knows about the holiday of Shavuos, that he knows that the Torah, which is God Almighty's gift of his wisdom to guide humanity, the blueprint for the creation, that is the day that we're celebrating the giving of that. So now we've gone from, so to bring full circle, we've gone from the coming of, we've been gifted the divine gift of liberty on Passover. Now we're working on a refining are shining, that is now of benefit to people, and it comes into the world in a noble way. And then we are now prepared to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai, a renewed giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. We're not merely celebrating the past historical giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. We're experiencing it right now. When it's going to be the holiday of Shavuos, we're actually going to read the 10 Commandments in the synagogue, which everyone should go to hear. And we are going to see how this is something that's speaking to us, to every single human being, and have a renewed experience of receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai through Moses, our teacher, and all the parts that apply to the Jewish people, all the parts that apply to the non-Jewish people, and then have a year of heightened inspiration and heightened activity of bringing through action and actions of loving kindness to bring the Torah into fulfillment, the blueprint of God's blueprint for creation into fulfillment in the world.